Hello, a very warm good morning to all of you and welcome to Unacademy. Welcome to today's The Hindu newspaper analysis, where we take a look at the daily edition of today's The Hindu newspaper, pick out the articles which are relevant for your examination, be it for the prelims or your mains, discuss the important points and extracts out of this article, and also from the other areas relevant and in news and which are associated with the topic in discussion, so that you get an overall and a comprehensive view with regards to what to appear or what to expect in the examination, and you should have the ability to approach these topics with much greater confidence. If you like this initiative of ours, then please don't forget to click on the like, share and the subscribe button. While having a discussion with these articles, we shall also be analyzing the type of questions which can be asked from these particular topics and analyze the art of answer writing, where I urge you to write the answers on your own, get them evaluated, and thereby improve your writing practice as well. So without further ado, let us take a look at the topics that we are going to hold a discussion for today. So today in total we are going to have a discussion for 9 different topics which have appeared in different sections of the newspaper. Starting from the editorial section, a ground plan for sustainable mass employment. Now, this is associated with various measures which can be implemented to bring forward a better rate of employment and to take care of the joblessness situation which prevails. So this is relevant for your GS paper 3. Then, West Asia crisis spells tough choices for China and Russia. So the various different types of equations which are evolving in the West Asian region between Iran and Israel, while that has put the entire world in a fix, China and Russia, they are in a particularly more difficult situation because they want a certain outcome, and what is it that they can do for it? That is something we can analyze here, relevant for your GS paper 2. Then, on the ethanol blending program. So this is a detailed article about the ethanol blending program, the issues faced and what can be done going ahead into the future, relevant for your GS paper 3. Then India and Malaysia upgrade their partnership or their kind of strategic partnership. They have elevated it. So that is something important for your international relations, along with India-Japan conducting 2+2 dialogue. So this is relevant for your GS paper 2, along with the aspect of PM's visit to Poland. So we are going to discuss these in greater detail, and some of the other topics which have been in news. For example, in Sikkim, there has been another landslide which has occurred, and it has damaged the Teesta power project. So here, Sikkim landslide damages the NHPC project. Then Meghalaya polio case is a vaccine-derived polio case. So after a long period of time, there has been a case of polio which has been detected in Meghalaya. So what is this vaccine-derived polio virus? That is something we are going to take a look into. And abandoning inflation targeting could be counterproductive. This is an article which has appeared in the business page of the today's newspaper. It is based upon a research paper which has been published by 2 scholars, which talks about RBI's entire approach of monetary policy framework targeting the inflation rate. So these are the various different articles that we are going to discuss. As you can see, the articles and today's newspaper is slightly heavily tilted towards the international relations. But having said that, let us start with the discussion of the first article in news, and that is a ground plan for sustainable mass employment. Now, first of all, one has to understand that employment generation has to be a key outcome and a key purpose and an aim for any government in power. Now, there have been various different contradicting views and theories with regards to the amount of jobs created, the number of jobs required, the percentage of unemployed population, etc., and various different labor force surveys as well as the RBI data. All of them indicate at different metrics. But all of them agree on one particular fact, and that is India is in dire need for creation of more employment and at a rapid pace. Only then can it be able to, or will India be able to cater to the demands of the large and burgeoning and increasing population? We do know that in our country, we have a majority of our population which is in the working age or lower than the working age. The demography of India is such that 65% of the population, 65% of population is below 35 years age. Below the age of 35 years. So you have a large amount of dividend to be gained from this population as they enter into the workforce. Various different countries throughout history, they have benefited from the fact that as and when more young people enter into the workforce, there it becomes economically more productive and the country moves on the economic ladder. But then you also have to keep in mind that in case there is a failure to create such amount of jobs or failure to generate such quality jobs, in that case what can happen? You will have a condition of oversupply of labor. Oversupply of labor. And you have to understand this chart very keenly because this is important. Oversupply of labor means what? For the same job, you have more number of people who are ready to apply, something that we are observing in India as of now. Now, you would have seen that even if vacancies are created or there is a vacancy for 1,000 individuals or 1,000 government posts, you have lakhs of people who apply for them. So, there is a condition of oversupply of labor. Now, what that actually implies is, or what it actually relates to is, a reduced income level. How? This leads to reduced income. How? Because, let's suppose, I am an individual who has requirement of certain jobs in my organization, in my company. And I have released that notification that I require one individual and for a particular skill set, I am ready to pay 50,000 per month. But then I find out that there are 1 lakh applicants for that job. Now, then my natural tendency will be that I am paying them 50,000 per month. What if I am paying them only 30,000 per month? In that case, what will happen? 1 lakh people might not be interested, but still around 20,000 people will be interested to work at an income level which is lower. Then let's suppose I become a bit more greedy. I say that, okay, for this job, I will give only 15,000. Then still I will have 5,000 people who are ready to apply. So think about it, for the same job for which the ideal payment which I was ready to do was around 50,000, I am able to hire people at 15,000 rupees. That is because of the oversupply of labor which is associated. So that is where the oversupply of labor always brings about a reduced income level. And many of the times what it leads to is an impact on the human capital, that is the person's ability to invest in education for the young ones, healthcare for their family, everything gets impacted quite significantly. So these are some of the major problems and the major issues. Having said that, once a country is unable to generate enough number of jobs, and unable to provide enough amount of wages or enough amount of, let's suppose, income for all of them, then the country gets into what is referred to as middle income trap. Income trap. Where you will find that the per capita income ends up stagnating at a particular level and you don't have an upward social mobility. Upward social mobility, that is someone who is earning very less, they are able to earn more as they try for more, as they work for more, and that is the upward social mobility which is very much required in any society to bring forward a justifiable wealth distribution as well. Now, this year's economic survey and even the various different governments and prime ministers' address to CII, all of them focused on the same aspect, and that is, in our country, while the growth has been happening quite significantly, the companies have been making heavy profits, but simultaneously enough jobs are not getting created. Because now the companies or the organizations are able to get people at a lower income level. So that means what? you need better job creation. So what are the ways in which more jobs can be created? So this article talks about various different measures in which more jobs can be created. Let us take a look at them point by point, one by one. Let us try to understand what can be the measures which can be implemented, starting with the bottom-up approach. So, in economic modeling system, you will find that typically the governments follow a top-down approach. That is, let us create wealth at the top, or let us promote the growth of the companies. These organizations will create those jobs, will give the opportunities, more people will get the jobs, they will create the demand in the economy, and like that, the entire job market will function and the economy will rise up. But here, what can be done is a bottoms-up approach. That is, at the level of the Gram Sabhas and at the level of, let's suppose, the Panchayat level. Now, in these areas, what can be done, and this is a kind of an innovative solution which has been provided, is let's suppose you consider a small cluster of houses, a small habitation. Now, there the Gram Sabhas, they can appoint an individual, let's suppose an individual A, who is well educated and who has got good amount of academic background and an idea about various different job sectors and job requirements. Now, that person A is appointed by the Gram Sabha as a kind of, let's suppose, a counselor. Now, individual youths in that hamlet or in that particular cluster, each of them need to be inquired about that what is their aspiration, what is it that they want to do, and which job they want to perform. Now, accordingly, there can be guidance provided and the skill upgradation required can be tailored for individual needs. So, like that, you can understand what the youth of individual region wants and you can be a facilitator, the Gram Sabha can be the facilitator of helping the youth achieve their goals there. So, that is the ownership by the Gram Sabhas. This is again pointing towards a decentralized model of governance which has been advocated by the 73rd Amendment as well. Now, converge initiatives on public goods and unbundling of funds. What does this say? So, basically, let's suppose in a particular area, let's consider a particular area within a district, within a state. Now, there the government invests for education, the government invests for healthcare, the government invests for infrastructure, the government invests for skill upgradation and various different other public goods that the government invests in. Now, what actually ends up happening is that the investment oftentimes is seen to be inadequate in these individual areas. You don't have enough investment in either education, either healthcare, either skill upgradation, etc. Why? Sometimes you will come across the fact that XYZ state government was unable to utilize its funds which were allocated for education or for healthcare. So, you have unutilized funds and lack of funds. So, this all points to mismanagement. And at the end of it, what is the end result? That people, they don't get the required amount of public services which will help them improve their human capital. What is this human capital? Human capital is basically the ability or the individual having a better education, better healthcare, and overall being able to work at optimal efficiency, basically dependent upon the healthcare, the education, the skill upgradation, etc. So, rather than having that channelization of funds in different areas, this article argues for unbundling of funds that provide a lump sum amount to the local government, again at the panchayat level, at the Gram Sabha level, and give the ownership to the local population. Let them decide where to allocate the funds. Because the argument is oftentimes the local governments and the local bodies, they are able to make better decisions with regards to where the priority lies. And that is where we can have a kind of a solution that if a local region feels the need, for example, in any particular area, if the number of children who are going to school that is abysmally low, then job creation is a far-sighted aim that you need to have. First of all, you need to provide education. In a particular area, if majority of the people are suffering from malnutrition, Job is not that which is prominently on their mind. Survivability of their kids is primarily there on the mind. So if the local governance setup gets that money, they can invest it judiciously at the time of requirement, and then that discretionary availability of funds will also mean better human capital and better availability or ability rather to create and find jobs as well. Then after that, introduction of vocational courses through the ITIs, industrial training institutes, etc., and also in normal colleges. For example, you have certain colleges which give you a certification with regards to becoming a tourist guide, becoming, let's suppose, helping in the service sector, becoming a trained technicians, etc. Not everybody aspires to become a doctor or an engineer. Many of them simply want to earn enough income in order to be able to support their family structure. So that is where vocational courses need to be provided, and certified vocational courses, not something where you have the shanties running these institutions and basically furnishing out these fake degrees. So there needs to be a certain level which needs to be ensured. China is one such country which has worked incredibly hard and provided and managed to provide vocational courses for a large section of population, able to generate jobs at a much faster rate. So we can take a leaf out of China's book in this case. Then standardized nursing and allied healthcare professional courses. Now in our country, you have a large section of population who train to be nurses and other allied healthcare professionals, and after getting trained, they find it very difficult to find employment from one. Let's suppose someone has done the nursing course from West Bengal or from, let's suppose, Kerala. Now they will find it slightly difficult to get a job maybe in Karnataka or maybe in Tamil Nadu, because the requirements are different. So what most of them end up doing, they end up migrating to West Asian nations, Middle East countries, and find jobs there. So there is a kind of a flight of skill there. So rather than facing that, what needs to be done is basically standardize these courses all across and ensure that all of them have the required parameters which are met. Because healthcare is one of those sectors in India which is going to require increased influx of people into the healthcare sector into the coming decades. As the population goes older and older, there is a requirement of healthcare in larger areas of the country. So this will not only provide jobs, but will cater to another problem that India has associated with healthcare. Then after that, creation of community cadres of caregiver to run creche services. Now, women and workforce participation of women, that is very low in our country. That is something which is at the level of our neighboring country like Pakistan. China has got almost twice the number of women in the workforce. While safety of women in the workforce is the need of the hour, is the requirement, which is something that even Supreme Court has observed yesterday. But at the same time, women, it has been found out through the subsequent periodic labor force surveys that women end up dropping out of the jobs after maternity, after they give birth to a child, because they don't find the circumstances or the environment adequate to support their child and the care which is required. So what is being advocated is that some of the trained professionals at the rural level, they can be trained significantly and very rigorously to be able to run some creche and daycare centers as well, so that these trained professionals can find additional income. At the same time, it can promote the woman to go and seek employment even after attaining motherhood. So this will serve two purposes at the same time. Then investment in ITIs and polytechnic institutions. Now these ITIs are meant to be the skill providers and the skill certifiers. Now these are supposed to provide the fodder for the manufacturing industry of the country. But of late, these ITIs, they have largely become a kind of dilapidated structures where the infrastructure is not well enough. If the infrastructure is taken care of, then the curriculum is not well designed and it is outdated. So that is why people coming out of the ITIs, they don't find meaningful employment. And that impacts the future generation also. If let's suppose a batch coming out of ITI, none of them are able to find jobs, then the next generation will not be enticed to join the ITIs at all. So there is a large gap, skill gap, which is opening up. So to bridge that skill gap, the ITIs and the polytechnic institutions, they have to be at the front end. Then introduction of enterprise and startup skills right at the school level, so that the students and the children learn the important nuances of how the business world operates. They understand and they gain the ambition of creating something on their own. Because the ability of the state to generate jobs will always be limited. If not today, tomorrow. If not tomorrow, day after tomorrow. They won't be able to furnish more jobs beyond that. So India is in need for more job creators. And that will happen if you have a good enough incubation centers, or even if not incubation, at least counseling centers in school level, so that they have a better idea about how to run businesses. Then increase stress on apprenticeship. That is a kind of training programs, and that is basically in collaboration with industries. The industries, they also require the manpower, but then that manpower is not skilled enough. So allow the industries to, or incentivize the industries in order to gain or take people for training purposes on temporary basis, on contractual basis, and thereby they can be trained, they can have better exposure, and the industry will also have trained, skilled professionals. This is something which has been targeted by the employment linked incentive scheme that the government has launched in this year's budget. So this is also one of the measures. Streamlining the availability of working capital. Working capital to run businesses, you need the availability of money. It is not as if you will sell your family silver in order to run businesses. You need money. Now, that availability of money is becoming a difficult reality, particularly in rural areas where, for example, the banks are a bit hesitant in order to lend money, because the banks, they fear that this money that I am lending out will never come back. So that risk assessment, etc., needs to be improvised, and you need to have more innovative products coming out, and that is what even RBI is working on. Then the Rural Livelihood Mission is working upon that, so that the banks are able to make the funds available as and when required, so that more entrepreneurship is promoted at the rural level, at the grassroots level. Mind you, rural India still has around 65% of Indian population as per our last census. So providing employment there can be significant benefit. Then utilization of Manrega funds in a better focused manner. So what this article argues is the fact that, look, jobs, they are not an end product in itself. Generation or creation of jobs is basically an amalgamation or a combination of multiple different factors taken together, where human capital, social upliftment, well-being of the population, everything, when it comes together, then only an individual will have the ability to make themselves skilled enough to find jobs. So every year, lakhs of crores of money is going into, or thousands of crores of money is going into Manrega funds. Now, many of these Manrega activities which are there, they are not well directed. Oftentimes, you would have come across these case studies where Manrega activities in a particular region involves digging up of a well, and after some time, after 1 month, when people have dug out the region, then the Manrega activity basically brings about filling of that ditch. So it is a kind of a reputationary process with no outcome. So what this article argues, that rather than that, focus on 2,500 water scarce districts or water scarce regions, and there generate these Manrega activities like rainwater harvesting, sustainable agriculture, so that while this will create jobs from Manrega, but at the same time it will bring about the social upliftment to such an extent that people living in those areas, they will also end up benefiting. So in those 2,500 water scarce districts also, identify the most backward families and the most economically deprived families, now provide jobs to them, so that there can be a kind of an overall upliftment. So these are some of the measures which have been suggested in order to generate more jobs in Indian economy. As you can see, that these measures, they encompass from the region of the Gram Sabhas to the aspect of bringing more women into employment, to overhauling of the vocational training, vocational education, upgradation of the ITIs and the polytechnic institutions, providing a similar level and an accredited level for the nursing staff, for the paramedical officials. Everything needs to be carried out simultaneously. You cannot have a piecemeal approach, and only when simultaneously everything is addressed, more jobs will be created in the economy, and more importantly, at the same time, we can have the availability of more jobs and oversupply of labor can be targeted, and thereby the country can basically escape from the mid-income trap that we are staring at given our present predicament. Okay. Now, let us take a look at the question. Now, this is an area from where question can be expected even in the essay, because jobs and unemployment has been a major area of focus. So, failure to provide enough jobs can lead India to fall into a middle income trap. Comment on the statement while suggesting measures to create jobs for the future generation. Now, here, this is a kind of a straightforward, simple question. What do you write in the introduction here? Introduction can begin directly by saying that India lies at a cusp of utilizing its demographic dividend, where majority of its population below the age of 35 years are going to enter into the workforce in the coming decades. So that is why the need of the hour is to create more jobs. Now, these jobs not necessarily coincide with the economic growth. Various different, that is something that you write in the body aspect. Now, the economic survey of 2023, or this year's economic survey that you can directly cite, the economic survey talks about the creation of the the better profit and better margins and incomes by the organizations, but not enough creation of jobs. This can be targeted, or this can be solved by certain measures. Write these steps, write a couple of sentences about each of these steps, and then in the conclusion talk about that the need of the hour is to create more jobs. Unless and until we do that, we are staring not only at a middle income trap, but also staring at a situation of a demographic crisis, okay, or a demographic disaster. That is how you can conclude the answer. Now, after that, moving on into the second article. West Asia crisis spells tough choices for China and Russia. Now, basically, this talks about the Iran-Israel crisis which has been brewing up. Ever since Israel basically has been deemed responsible, even though it has not gained or it has not taken the responsibility directly, but it is Israel's hand which has killed the Palestinian leader Ismail Haniyeh, who was the Hamas's chief politburo and who was seen as a kind of, now various different Chinese presses and newspapers, they have also dubbed him as a pacifist. That is, he was seeking peace, but instead he was the leader of the Hamas, and he was deemed responsible for many of the activities that Hamas was doing. So because of that killing, there has been a tense condition and a tense situation which has been prevalent in the region of West Asia, and Iran and Israel, it is expected by the world that they are going to go into the loggerhead, and this can be very violent and very vicious. The entire world is watching. US has deployed the various aircraft carriers, USS Abraham Lincoln being one of them, and US has basically deployed them in order to put pressure on Iran. But at the same time, one has to keep in mind that you have large players in Asia, that is China and Russia, who have also been heavily invested in the region of West Asia. That is where they face certain tough choices. So let us analyze them. When we talk about China's role, now China largely has been trying to place itself in such a manner that it is seen as a peacemaker in West Asia and at the same time a supporter of the West Asian cause. Now, what is that West Asian cause? West Asian cause, as envisioned by China, what is written in the article as well, has been the fact that they are fighting the oppressors. And in China's case and in the Arab world's case, the oppressor is the same, that is the Western world. And at the same time, they are fighting the aftermath of the colonial experience that they had. So that is why China is going all out in order to assuage or in order to mend relationship with the region of West Asia and in order to be seen and perceived as their sympathizers. So China has been the chief mediator between Iran and the Iranians and the Saudis since 2023, last year itself, where it held mediatory talks between the various different delegation level members. So there, China has got its interest. Now, mediation between various factions of the Palestinian groups, the Fatah group, the Hamas group, that is also something which has been chaired by China. Now, again, China basically, when it is trying to seek mediation between the Palestinian groups, it seeks to attain again that larger agenda of West Asia, that is coming out of the colonial experiences and the colonial aftermath which has wreaked havoc in these and targeting the Western countries. Then Iran's supply of cheaper oil to China has been responsible quite significantly and has allowed China to fill its strategic oil reserves. Now, that is something which is beneficial and has benefited China significantly. So, China doesn't want its interest in that region to be riled up. Now, what China wants basically is that Iran should develop that anti-West sentiment, anti-American sentiment to be very particular, but at the same time, Iran should not cross the red line. What is the red line? That is the nuclearization of Iran. So, as you would be aware that Iran for a long period of time has been tinkering with the development of nuclear weapons, exploring the idea for the development of nuclear weapons, and the Western countries have tried to dissuade Iran from doing so. That is where you had the very famous P5+1 delegation level meet and an international agreement which was designed and which was negotiated when Barack Obama was the president of US, where Iran agreed not to develop nuclear weapons. Now, this was a very difficult decision domestically for Iran. It backfired for Iran domestically. But at the same time, it was seen as a great victory for global peace. Now, when Barack Obama was replaced by Donald Trump, now immediately all that negotiation went out of the window and Iran straight away started its urge or its aspiration to develop and acquire nuclear weapons. Given that the US is going for elections again, and given the fact that there is increased probability of Donald Trump coming back to power, there are fears across the world that this could push Iran into the era of nuclear weapons, and from there is no turning back. So that is where China's ambition in West Asia, China wants the West Asian countries to be anti-West as in anti-American and anti-European, but at the same time not develop those nuclear weapons. Now, when it comes to Russia, now Russia has also been heavily invested into the region of Middle East. Ever since the Syrian crisis involving Assad's regime, now at that point of time when US had its intervention in Syria, now at that point of time Russia was supporting Assad's regime. Now, at that point of time, Russia established its base in Latakia province, and that base provided Russia not only access to the Middle East but at the same time access to the Mediterranean. So, Russia has maintained its base there ever since that point of time. And when Russia intervened in Syria, and that was in order to support the regime of Syria against America's wishes, at that point of time, Iran also jumped into that Syrian controversy and that Syrian situation. So, Iran has also developed a lot of these interests in Syria. At the same time, latest intelligence reports also suggest that Russia has been having an increased foothold in the region of the Arabian Peninsula, particularly arming the Houthi rebels and allowing them and arming them with perfect munitions which can target the merchant shipping lanes. So, there also Russia has been increasing its foothold. Now, it is because of this that the European powers and US in particular, they have been hesitant to reduce their foothold and their number of people and personnel that they have deployed in Iraq and Syria, which has further flared up the situation. So, it is like the game of the great powers being played at the West Asian playground, and the worst outcome or any outcome is not looking good for the region of West Asia. So, when we talk about Iran's predicament, nuclear weaponization, that is something which is there on the agenda across the globe. The entire world is talking about it. Having said that, the new elected head, now along with his cabinet, they are seen to be, or they are deemed to be, quite moderate in terms of their approach, and that is where, if the nudge comes from the Western countries, there can be a peaceful resolution. Growing anti-West sentiment has been there across the Iranian region because of sanctions imposed by the West and the trade supplies from Iran being cut off from all various different countries. So, that is something that Iran has to counter. And stakes in Syria makes Iran an important player in the entirety of the region of the Middle East and West Asia. So, it is out of this particular quagmire, it is out of this particular different kind of situation where these countries have to make a choice about their future actions. So, what is the way forward? The way forward has to be people-centric. You have to keep into account what is it that the people want in that region. People want economic prosperity. Regions of Iraq and Syria have been facing deprivations for almost 2 decades now, where the basic supply of food, healthcare, education, etc. is absolutely out of the window. So, that needs to be prioritized, and that is where global governance needs to come into the picture. That is where the role of UN and other international organizations come into the spotlight. Their inability to provide that relief into this region puts the entire global governance setup into a question mark. And it raises questions whether you have the Security Council which is still empowered enough, or does it still carry any weight, or is it simply a formal body within the United Nations at all? So, that is where the international organizations need to step up to the hour and need to mend their ways. And at the same time, given the fact that Russia right now is already embroiled in a conflict with Ukraine, Russia doesn't have enough amount of bandwidth to deploy its professionals in Middle East as well and personnels in Middle East. So, it is China who is going to take the baton forward, and China is going to emerge as the next big player in the region of Middle East if it has not already emerged. Okay? So, in this article we have seen the issue in the Middle East, what is actually flaring up, and what are the possible outcomes, and what is the way forward. Now, moving to the next article on the ethanol blending program. This is a very important article relevant for your GS paper 3. Now, what is this ethanol blending program? So, basically, this ethanol is produced as a byproduct from sugarcane, from maize, from any food grains you can produce ethanol. Now, this ethanol primarily in India is produced out of sugarcane. Now, sugarcane production in India is quite significantly high, but at the same time, all that sugarcane, the byproduct of sugarcane, that is bagasse, molasses, etc., they are not utilized so significantly. So, there is a lot of wastage. So, ethanol produced out of them can be mixed with petroleum and other fuel mixtures, and they can be provided to the vehicles. That will reduce our foreign exchange reserves and the foreign exchange that we spend on importing petroleum. At the same time, it will have various other benefits. Now, India had set up a target of blending 20% of petroleum by 2026, 20% of ethanol in the petroleum by 2026. Now, this is a target that India is about to reach, and India can achieve that. This has happened on the back of increased capacity for ethanol distilleries from the sugar mills and the sugarcane manufacturers as well. But at the same time, there are certain problems which confront us when it comes to ethanol blending. So, let us analyze the entire article in slightly greater detail. So, what is the impact of ethanol blending first of all? it will save our foreign exchange reserves. How? By reducing the import bill. How? Because all the fuel that we are using, majority of that fuel is imported. So, by reducing the import bill, we will be able to save the much required foreign exchange. Then boost for the stagnating sugar industry. Now, India, along with Brazil, is amongst the largest producers of sugar across the world. As a consequence of that, our production is so very high that not all of it is being able to be exported or being utilized in the domestic sector. Due to which what you experience is that you have massive stockpiles across the entire region of the country, and the farmers, the sugarcane farmers, they are not paid in a timely manner, which is leading to distress at the farm level, distress for the sugar mills as well, and the entire sector is not doing well enough. So that is where you need to have a boost for the stagnating sugar industry by utilizing the byproduct of the sugarcane. You see, sugarcane, when it is utilized, when it is processed, you have the sugarcane juice and syrup, which is extracted. Along with that, you have molasses and bagasse. These are the byproducts. Now, sugarcane juice and syrup, this is mainly utilized for the production of sugar. But once you utilize molasses and bagasse for the production of ethanol, that can be then sold into the market for ethanol blending. At the same time, it will give some amount of income to the farmers as well. So, the farm level income also improves. So, that is where ethanol blending is a perfect solution for the ailing sugar industry in general. But here, what is happening is that due to increased demand for ethanol, some of that sugarcane juice and syrup is also being diverted for the ethanol production. Now, in December 2023, the government feared that our overall sugar stocks are lower. That is where there was a limitation placed on the amount of this utilization for ethanol production. But then, upon revised estimates and later records, it has indicated that we still had enough amount of sugar production, because understand, sugar is one of those commodities where the price rise will always impact the poorest of the poor population. So that is a risk that the government can never take. So that is why, in order to bring down the sugar prices, the government had put a limitations on this, and many of the various different producers, they had started utilizing maize for production of ethanol, broken rice for production of ethanol. Now, that has endangered the food security. At least that is the perception, that if you start utilizing maize for the production of ethanol, you are hampering the food security. So, what is the way forward in this? We will talk about it. Now, when you have the ethanol blending which is done in the vehicles, it also lowers the greenhouse gas emissions. Various industry bodies have said that ethanol blending lowers the amount of nitrous oxides which are released in the atmosphere. So, that is also beneficial. Having said that, there are issues. For example, we still don't have enough amount of distilleries and enough amount of concentrators in order to produce and manufacture that much amount of ethanol. Secondly, the industry bodies, they have raised an alarm that majority of the engines, they are the vehicle engines, they are showing lower mileage and lower efficiency with the ethanol blended petroleum. So, the automobile sector also needs to provide that upgradation of engines or the retuning of engines, so that the mileage and the efficiency is not hampered because of this blending program. Now, you have to understand that when we talk about ethanol, it is a biofuel. Now, there are various different categories of biofuel. This is relevant for your prelims as well as for your mains examination. So, what are the various categories of biofuels? So, basically, here you will observe that the first generation of biofuel, that is cereals, that is maize, broken rice, starch, sugar, that is from sugarcane, oil crops. From there, the fermentation is done to produce ethanol. This is the ethanol produced as first generation ethanol. Then industrial waste, wood, grass, forest residue, that is the second generation of biofuel which is produced. Then third generation, you produce ethanol from algae. And fourth generation, genetically modified algae, specially designed algae for only the manufacturing of biofuel. Now, various different government policies, they are targeting the production only of the first and the second generation of biofuel. Now, the potential for this is that it will always have an impact on the food security of the country. For example, maize is increasingly utilized for the production of ethanol. If you observe this chart, you will observe that, for example, C heavy molasses, an output of a byproduct of sugarcane, B heavy molasses outcome of or a byproduct of sugarcane, sugarcane juice, surplus rice, damaged grains, maize, all of them have been utilized to produce ethanol. You will observe that out of this maize, observe how increased amount of maize is being utilized to produce ethanol out of late. So, C heavy molasses, B heavy molasses, sugarcane juice, there the amount utilized needs to grow much higher, okay, rather than using maize. So, that is where our ethanol blending program needs to focus on the third and the fourth generation of biofuels. There is an issue with utilizing of maize. For example, now when we talk about maize, we consume maize in large quantities, very large quantities. We produce good amount of maize, but we are very large consumers of maize as well. Now, every year we end up importing millions of dollars worth of maize from across the world. Why? Because our domestic demands are unmet. So, when you divert maize for production of ethanol, the price of maize goes up and it impacts what? The common population, but at the same time the feedstock and animal husbandry sector. How? Because the feed for the animals in that maize and the maize stalk is an important component. We know that in our agricultural sector, poultry and the animal rearing sector, that is the one growing in 8 to 9% or in certain cases of aquaculture double digit. Otherwise, the crop growing sector is having a very slow growth of around 2% to 3%. So, if our poultry sector, if our animal husbandry sector, that is impacted by the rising price of maize, then you can understand that the overall impact it will have on the agriculture, just because we are not utilizing sugarcane for production of ethanol, but rather we are utilizing maize and we are utilizing damaged grains there. So, that is where you have an issue. But then there is an issue with sugarcane also. You have to understand that sugarcane is a water intensive crop. Sugarcane requires lot of water. So, when we talk about issues, sugarcane is a water guzzling crop. It requires close to around 120 centimeter of rainfall every year. So, when you are utilizing that sugarcane or growing sugarcane specifically for ethanol production, you are basically utilizing billions of gallons of water in order to produce ethanol. So, water guzzling crop, that is sugarcane. Then, in comparison, maize is climate friendly. Maize doesn't require that much amount of irrigation, can grow well as well. But the problem with utilizing maize is what? The problem is, first of all, increased import, right? So, it will defy the very purpose of or the very aim of saving the foreign exchange reserves. And the second is, maize always depletes the soil fertility. It drains the soil of its various fertile nutrients. So, continuous growth of maize in a field or a farmland can render the soil to be degraded. So, drains soil fertility. Then what about broken grains, rice, etc.? Now that is something which is not very popular a decision. In states like Tamil Nadu, broken rice or broken grains of rice, many of the times they go to waste rather than being diverted for ethanol production. Because the larger public perception with ethanol production is that this will be utilized for alcohol. So that is why it is not a popular decision. So that is where you have to understand that we need to promote the third and the fourth generation of biofuels, or what can be done in areas which receive heavy amount of rainfall. There sugarcane and maize can be grown as a result of crop rotation, so that you don't have the drainage of nutrients from the soil is able to retain the nutrients. Now, various different states, they are also gaining more profit from the ethanol being utilized or diverted for alcohol and liquor production rather than diverting that ethanol for ethanol blending program. So, there is a conflict between blending program and alcohol production. Okay. So this also needs to be ironed out. For example, the article has listed the condition of 3 states, that is UP, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. While UP has been cited in this article as one of those states which has fulfilled its entire requirement for ethanol blending out of sugarcane also, and has diverted the required amount even for alcohol. Tamil Nadu, on the other hand, has been cited as one of those states which has diverted almost the entirety of ethanol for alcohol and liquor production, so that it can benefit out of that in terms of revenue earned. Maharashtra also has been cited as one of those states which is diverting more ethanol for alcohol than for blending program. So this has put the entire ethanol production and the blending program at risk. So what needs to be done, or what is the way forward amongst all these issues that has been thrown at you? The way forward is, first of all, the need of the farmers need to be kept at the top. The farmers need more income. So there needs to be a better procurement practice from the sugar growing areas, sugarcane growing areas, so that the farm income is something which is increased. By utilization of B molasses, C class molasses, their overall income can be increased. Second, the distillery capacities need to be increased and improved further so that our overall generation of ethanol increases. Third, there needs to be a more directed focus and better research at the third and the fourth generation of biofuels. Fourth, we need to have a crop rotational growth of maize and sugarcane so that the entire crop fertility is not destroyed, but at the same time you can have the feedstock for the production of ethanol. And then eventually there needs to be a criteria fixed for the states where they can utilize this much amount of ethanol produced for, let's suppose, blending program, and for the rest for the alcohol production. Now, if the states want to increase their revenue, they have to increase the amount of ethanol that they are distilling out, right? So the distillery capacity will be improved. And then eventually the automobile manufacturers need to also pitch in better research, better development of the third and the fourth generation biofuel. So these are some of the way forward. So if I have to list out the way forward for your better revision, so that you are able to revise them, encapsulate them in a better manner, the first is more attention to second and third generation, or where we can talk about third and fourth generation biofuel. and in this, utilization of industries. Okay. Then, increased farm income to be ensured. How? Improving the procurement. Then, broken and discarded grains can be used. Discarded grains to be used. Because these broken and discarded grains, they are not used for public distribution system, so they generally go to waste. So use them if you are generating first and second generation biofuel. Then after that, the crop rotation of maize and sugarcane, where sugarcane to be grown only in those areas which have adequate rainfall. Otherwise, it is going to lead to unsustainable agriculture, which is going to impact quite significantly. And then after that, mandated targets to states. Which mandate or which target? In terms of how much they can provide for ethanol, how much they can divert for, let's suppose, the production of alcohol. So that these are some of the ways which can be implemented to improve the ethanol blending program and increased efficiency of engines, automobile engines. Okay. So this is something which is the way forward. So in this article, we have seen what is that ethanol blending program, what are the benefits out of it, what are the impacts, what are the issues, and what is the way forward. A question: what are the different generations of biofuel? Discuss the challenges and opportunities for ethanol blending program in India. 15 marks, 250 words. So in the intro, what do you write? In the introduction, you talk about the definition of biofuels. So biofuels, what are those? These are the fuel mixtures produced by biological methods and biological organisms, and the production is eco-friendly and is also climate friendly. That's it. Now, thereafter, if the introduction is too short, there itself you write, or if this definition is around 20-25 words, then go into the body and then write that biofuels are classified into different generations based upon their method of production, and then talk about the 4 generations of biofuel. In India, largely the concentration or largely the attention has been on the production of first and second generation of biofuel. Talk about them in further detail and talk about the ethanol blending program. What is it? What its aim is overall. Okay? And what are the challenges we have talked about? And then in the conclusion, this ethanol blending is important for India in not only to save its foreign exchange reserves, but at the same time allow India to improve the level of income for the farmers in a larger community setup. Okay? Now, the next article. This has appeared in the front page. Now, even though much detail has not been given in the article, we will fish out certain details from the Prime Minister's website, etc., to get an idea about the Indo-Malaysian relationship. So, India-Malaysia upgrade strategic partnership, discuss entry to BRICS. Malaysia has been targeting an entry into the BRICS group of countries for a long period of time. Now, India and Indo-Malaysian relationship, they have not always been in good news headlines. There has always been some or the other prickly issues where India and Malaysia, they have been at loggerheads. For example, you have to understand that India has been one of the large scale importers of palm oil from Malaysia. Malaysia and Indonesia, they are amongst the largest producers of palm oil. Now, palm oil is utilized for edible purposes, for manufacturing of cosmetics, soaps, almost anything and everything that we utilize, consumer products, they use palm oil. So India would be heavily dependent on Malaysian imports. But then, after abrogation of Article 370, Malaysia made a statement in the UN which was seen to be anti-India. Since that point of time, the sentiment, public sentiment developed, and India also curtailed its import of Malaysian palm oil. So that is where the Indo-Malaysian relationship started nosediving. Then after that, Malaysia provides refuge to Zakir Naik, who has been touted by India as one of the persons of interest, where he has been seen as inciting certain sentiments which are extremist and fundamental in nature. So that is where again there have been zones of divergence. But there are areas of convergence as well. We have cultural and historic ties. And other than that, the Malayan Peninsula forms a gateway into the region of Indian Ocean. That is where the Malaysian president, basically Anwar Ibrahim, who made a visit along with a high-powered delegate. Now, Ibrahim also made that observation that, look, Atlantic Ocean is plagued by the dark history of colonialism. Pacific Ocean is embroidered in a lot of controversies and a lot of conflicts between the Western powers and China. It is the Indian Ocean which is being seen as an island of peace, an area of peace, and the countries around it have to cooperate in order to progress forward. So that is where both of the countries have convergence. And that is where a host of various different MOUs and agreements were signed in various different areas to provide importance to this and also elevate the relationship to a strategic level. At the other hand, Malaysia basically cited its interest in order to basically get admitted into the BRICS group of nations. Having said that, Malaysia also appreciated India for its resilient fight against climate change and also being the voice of the global south, where issues of development, climate change, etc. can be raised and the issues of developing world can be brought to the fore. Now let us take a look at the key outcomes of this particular meeting, which you can write, you can expect in a question, direct question about Indo-Malaysian relationship and what has been the key progresses there. So let us take a look at some of the key outcomes. So relationship to be consolidated to a comprehensive strategic partnership between India and Malaysia. Exchange of MOUs, Memorandum of Understandings, for cooperation in a wide variety of fields, from tourism to youth, etc. So recruitment, employment and repatriation of workers. Ayurveda and other traditional systems of medicines. There also the University of Malaya, there also there has to be an Ayurveda chair. So that has also been agreed upon. Digital technologies, culture, arts and heritage, tourism, public administration and governance reforms, learning from each other's best practices, youth and sports, and also financial services between the Labuan Financial Services Authority and the International Financial Services Centers Authority, India, so that you can have a better financial cooperation as well. But it is not only restricted to that. Malaysia appreciated India's initiative in hosting the Voice of Global South Summit, where the voices and the interests of the countries of the Global South have been raised. Appreciation of a high bilateral trade of around $19.5 billion, but again, it is just a scratch in terms of what these two countries can end up achieving. There's a huge amount of potential. Then both sides agreed to support and expedite the ASEAN-India Trade in Goods Agreement. Now, this is something which has been in the offing for a long period of time, where the countries of the ASEAN group and India, they are basically negotiating on a goods trade agreement so that they can have a user-friendly and trade facilitative for businesses, communities, and also better interest rates, better rates for import and export that can improve the business community and increase their income in both these regions. So Malaysia is going to be the chair for ASEAN in 2025. It is going to hold the presidentship for ASEAN in 2025. So that is where Malaysia has agreed to put forward these negotiations on a fast track. Then collaboration between the Reserve Bank of India and Bank Negara Malaysia to promote the usage of local currency settlement in bilateral trade and investment, and also to promote and encourage that the local trade between each other should be settled in terms of local currency so as to have an alternative payment system other than the hard currency, that is the dollar or the pound. The signing of MOU on digital technologies and encourage the early convening of Malaysia-India Digital Council, improving the digital infrastructure in Malaysia, and also India is seeking to implement the kind of UPI, the payment interface, that to be developed even in the region of Malaysia for better financial transaction. Startup India and Cradle Fund of Malaysia, both aimed at improving the startup ecosystem among other stakeholders through the Startup Alliance. Then there has been a kind of agreement to recognize and address the linkages between terrorism and transnational organized crime, because it has been found out that many of the persons of interest who commit a crime in India, they escape and find refuge in Malaysia, Zakir Naik case being one of those prominent ones. So that is where the addressing of that issue has been at the forefront. Discussion for the establishment of Tiruvalluvar Chair of Indian Studies at University Malaya, strengthen cooperation in promoting sustainable energy and adapting to climate change, including being partnered at the International Solar Alliance, climate and disaster resilient infrastructure. So this is where India has been lauded by its Malaysian counterpart as well. So these are some of the areas of cooperation that India and Malaysia have worked upon. But understand, there are still certain challenges which confront Indo-Malaysian relationship. Amongst the challenges, the major challenge has been to get rid of these reservations of the past with regards to Malaysia's stance when it comes to Jammu Kashmir, Malaysia's stance when it comes to hosting of these and providing refuge to these people of interest. So getting forward and getting ahead of that will be the need of the hour, because Malaysia can be a vital partner in protecting the Indian Ocean region from the aggressive designs of China. Now, because we are talking about aggressive designs of China, that leads us to the next article, that is India-Japan conduct 2+2 dialogue with focus on the Indo-Pacific. Now, this was marked by the arrival of the Japanese Defense Minister and Foreign Minister, and this 2+2 dialogue with Japan is aimed at improving the bilateral ties, but at the same time setting up the strategic goal and the parameters what the partnership can achieve. Now, this is particularly with regards to the troubled waters in the region of Western Pacific, where a lot of disputes have been thriving up because of the hegemonic designs of China in particular. Japan has also been reeling under these aggressive designs and aggressive patrolling by China. So freedom of navigation and the right of flight has been some of the important key areas for discussion, but at the same time, expanding defense collaboration, more exercises between the Indian and the Japanese forces are the things which are going to be on the agenda. This is a new story which is going to develop in the coming days. Now, other than that, the Prime Minister's visit is slated to be in Poland. Prime Minister is set to visit Poland. Now, this is going to be the first visit by a Prime Minister after a gap of almost around 45 years. So that is momentous. After a gap of 45 years, an Indian Prime Minister is going to visit Poland. Now, this is largely seen as a symbolic move, a symbolic gesture, but at the same time, this holds a lot of potential. You see, Poland was vital for India when it came to extraction and basically the people who were being evacuated from Ukraine and Russia. Poland became a node for the evacuation of Indian students and Indian population through or from the region of the disputed or the troubled and the war-torn area of Ukraine. So Poland has been very vital for India. Now, the bilateral trade between Poland and India is around $6 billion. Now, that is significant, but the potential is there for more. India and in Poland, you have an existing population of close to around 25,000 Indians. Out of that, close to around 5,000 are students. So, people to people collaboration, the scope is significant. So, this visit, while largely is going to be symbolic in terms of paying gratitude to Poland for helping evacuate the Indian citizens, but at the same time is going to be aimed at improving the business ties. Now, Indo-Polish relationship, there is a lot of scope to improve there, because Poland, when it comes to it, it is amongst the major powers of or major economies of the European Union and is going to be the chair of the European Union in the coming days. So, that is where even when it comes to the facilitation of free trade agreement between India and European Union, Poland has got a significantly important role to play. At the same time, India will do well in order to explore newer areas for its export markets, where many of the countries are facing the brunt of recession. These newer markets can be the area of opportunity. At the same time, many of the Polish industries, they are keenly waiting to establish their sectors in India, but they don't have enough amount of idea about how to operate businesses in India. So, that is where an opportunity lies going ahead, and India needs to promote itself. India needs to basically market itself in a better manner in Poland, and for that increased amount of awareness needs to come in about what the Indian environment and what the Indian opportunities are, and for that the Prime Minister's visit is seen to be an ideal kickstart which can then move this relationship even further. Various different business communities in Poland have already argued that the general perception of India, the soft power of India, is very good and positive in Poland. But that has to be exploited economically and monetarily. And for that, investments need to come in. For that, there needs to be a bridge and a confidence building measure. And that is where this visit is vital. Okay? Now, after that, we move to certain of the articles in a shortened format relevant for your prelims. Sikkim landslide damages the building of the NHPC project in the Tista river system. Now, this is the same area, or this is the same project which was damaged by the glacial lake outburst flood which occurred in Sikkim in 2023. Which claimed a lot of casualties. Now, it is in the same area where a fresh landslide has occurred. Now, you have to understand that these landslides, they are very frequent in the region of the northern Himalayas, western Himalayas and the region around Sikkim. So, these landslides keep on happening. The reason for these landslides are touted to be the presence of the sedimentary rocks in this region, not in general. Sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks, why? Because these sedimentary rocks, they allow the percolation of water. So, they can get super saturated with water. As a consequence of that, when you have these sedimentary rocks which are filled with water, which get saturated with water, they get disjointed from the parent rock system and they can easily slide over. And at the same time, the steep slope in the case of the Himalayas. The Himalayas, they have a steep southern slope and a gentle northern slope. That is a characteristic feature of the Himalayas, which is also what is referred to as the hogback topography. So, while these are topographical regions which always can entice or can always induce a landslide, but at the same time, heavy rains in the region have also led to the occurrence and the triggering of these landslides. Okay? So, these are the reasons why the landslides have occurred. People thankfully had been evacuated and there has not been any casualty which has been reported, and Border Road Organization is basically finding an alternate route, and various different, the Department of Mines and Geology has also been called upon to provide a way forward about how to go ahead for the short term and the long term measure so that this region is safe. Now, this is a kind of an important hydroelectric power project where the expected output is going to be around 510 megawatts, which is huge, which can provide a significant amount of energy security in the region. But then again, prone to landslides. So here, I give you a task that in the comment section, I want you to list the reasons why you have increased landslides in the region of the Himalayas, and also the zones in Himalayas which are prone to landslides. A minimum of 5 to 6 reasons need to be cited by those of you who are aware of it. Okay? Now, then coming to the next article. The Meghalaya polio case is a vaccine-derived case. So, there has been a case of polio reported from the region of Meghalaya, where a young one who was given the polio vaccine, he has been suffering from polio. So, this has been clarified by the officials. Now, you have to understand that India was declared polio free by WHO in 2014. Because after 2011, there had not been any reported case of the polio virus, wild polio virus or wild polio infection. That has largely been attributed to the success of our universal immunization program and the polio vaccination program. Now, this fresh case of polio virus, that is being seen as a kind of the CVDPV, that is circulating vaccine-derived polio virus. What is this? So, basically when a vaccine is administered, in that vaccine, a very weakened polio virus is administered into the body of the individual, a very weakened polio virus. Now, sometimes what happens? Now, what is the purpose of that? The purpose is basically that when that weakened polio virus enters in, the body develops its own natural immune response for that polio virus, fights it away and develops that capability for the future as well, so that the body is not impacted by that virus going ahead into the future. Having said that, in certain cases where the individuals have very weak immune system, in that case, what happens? That this vaccine of the weakened polio virus can impact them. They can influence them. So, that is the case which has happened in the region of Meghalaya. At the same time, you have to understand that the body, due to its excretion system, it excretes the virus as well. And that virus from the excreta can move on into other host recipients. If immunization is not there, it can impact the other host recipients. So, that virus from the excreta keeps on circulating and can impact. That is what is known as the circulating vaccine-derived polio virus. So, that is where the entire community is on alert, and individual by individual basis, the cases are being tracked that whether it is spreading or not. As of now, one individual has been gaining that paralytic symptoms of polio. Okay? So, for your prelims, you need to know what is that vaccine-derived virus from the weakened polio virus administered in the vaccine. What is that circulating vaccine-derived virus? It is from the excreta, where that virus is excreted from the body and eventually can circulate into the host recipients which have not been administered the vaccine. Then moving on to the last topic, and that is abandoning inflation targeting could be counterproductive. Now, this is largely an academic study which has been carried out by 2 individuals. Now, here what you need to understand is basically the fact, a reiteration of the fact that RBI's monetary policy is largely targeted towards the inflation, keeping the inflation in check. And that inflation target is around 4% plus minus 2%. That is the upper ceiling of 6% and the lower ceiling of 2%. So, within that the inflation should be there. So, if the inflation, let's suppose, rises up, then accordingly the interest rates in the economy, they are basically tinkered with. So let's suppose the inflation rises up. So at that point of time, the central bank raises the interest rate to reduce the money supply in the economy and thereby control the inflation. If the inflation is controlled, is in check, then after that the interest rates are reduced so as to improve the money supply to bolster the growth in the economic setup. So basically it is the interest rates which are basically having an inflation target. So there have been talks that in order to improve the growth rate, the RBI should lower the interest rates so that more companies will invest. But then the problem with that is that it can also tinker with the inflation and it can impact the larger section of the population. So that is what the study talks about, that barring a few months, that is in the year of 2022, barring those few months, the inflation has largely been in this range and that has worked significantly, at the same time promoting growth. So RBI should basically be focusing on the inflation target itself while revising its interest rates going ahead into the future. Okay? So that brings us to the end of the discussion for the day. I hope the discussion has been helpful and productive for all of you. Do try to write the answers for the questions on your own. Try to improve. And till we meet again, take care of yourself. Goodbye. Thank you.